Take that off. Someone like you doesn't earn medals. You borrow them from real soldiers." Officer Mercer's voice sliced through the courthouse lobby as his finger stabbed toward Imani Rhodes's chest, his lip curling with open contempt. "You think pinning that on makes you anything more than a fraud?" His hand lunged forward, hovering over the Purple Heart, like he was ready to rip it off himself, the metal catching the harsh overhead light, while whispers spread and phones tilted to capture the moment. Behind her, Malik's chains clinked as he struggled, his voice cracking as deputies dragged him away. But Mercer only leaned closer, breath thick with arrogance, enjoying the audience. Imani didn't flinch, didn't step back, just raised her hand and stopped his before he could touch it, her silence louder than anything he'd said. And standing there, steady and unshaken, she watched a man tear apart his own future, without realizing exactly who he had just decided to humiliate. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The courthouse lobby buzzed with morning activity, a stream of lawyers clutching briefcases and families shifting nervously on hard plastic benches. Fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over everything, making even the polished floor tiles look tired and worn. Imani Rhodes stood near the security checkpoint, her dark blazer crisp despite the humid morning. Her fingers moved to the Purple Heart pinned to her lapel, adjusting it with the precision of someone who had earned the right to wear it. Her eyes fixed on the corridor where deputies would bring in her nephew Malik. When they led him through in handcuffs, Imani's jaw tightened. Malik looked smaller somehow, his usually confident posture diminished by the restraints. Their eyes met across the lobby, and she gave him a slight nod. "Stay strong. Take that off!" The command cut through the murmur of courthouse business. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Imani turned slowly toward the voice, facing Officer Dale Mercer as he strode across the lobby, his face already flushed with authority. "You heard me," Mercer said, jabbing his finger toward her chest. "That medal. Take it off right now." The lobby had gone eerily quiet. Phones appeared in hands, recording. Imani stayed perfectly still, her military training evident in her controlled breathing and steady gaze. "Ma'am, you're not going to come in here pretending to be something you're not." Mercer's voice dripped with contempt. "That's stolen valor. That's a crime." "I earned every medal I wear," Imani said, her voice low but clear enough to carry. Mercer stepped closer, using his height to loom over her. "Yeah? Prove it. Show me your military ID right now." His breath was hot with coffee and self-righteousness. "Because I know what real veterans look like, and you're not it." From the corner where deputies held him, Malik's voice rang out. "That's my aunt. She served 3 tours. She saved lives." "Shut up!" A deputy yanked Malik's arm. "You're making it worse for yourself." Imani's fingers curled into loose fists at her sides, but her voice remained steady. "Officer Mercer, I've provided my documentation to the court already. It's in my nephew's file." "I don't care what's in any file." Mercer's face reddened further. "You're trying to play on sympathy, wearing decorations you didn't earn." "Well, not in my courthouse." More phones appeared. A woman at the metal detector whispered, "This isn't right." Someone else muttered, "He can't do that." Mercer's hand shot out toward the Purple Heart. "If you won't take it off, I will." In one fluid motion, Imani caught his wrist. She didn't squeeze or twist. She simply stopped his hand, her grip precise and unshakable. Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, the lobby saw the soldier she was, composed under fire, trained to respond with exactly the force needed. No more and no less. "Do not touch me," she said, each word distinct and measured. Mercer's face contorted. "She's assaulting me! She's assaulting an officer!" He tried to pull his arm back, but Imani's grip held just long enough to make her point before she released him. "Get her out of here!" Mercer shouted. "She's hostile." 2 more security officers moved in, hands on their belts. The crowd pressed back, creating a circle of space around the confrontation. Phone cameras recorded everything. "You want to go to jail?" Mercer's voice rose higher. "Because that's where you're headed. Assaulting an officer, impersonating a veteran. Antimony!" Malik struggled against the deputies holding him. "Don't let them do this. She's a hero. She's got the scars to prove it. You're just a bully with a badge." "Get him out of here," Mercer barked. The deputies dragged Malik toward the holding area, his shoes squeaking against the floor as he resisted. "This is what they do. They can't stand seeing us with any honor, so they try to strip it away." Imani remained motionless as more officers surrounded her, their hands hovering near their weapons. The morning light through the high windows caught the Purple Heart, making it gleam. The medal that recognized her sacrifice, her blood spilled in service, now made her a target in the very building meant to dispense justice. A lawyer in an expensive suit stopped to watch. A maintenance worker leaned on his floor buffer, eyes wide. An elderly woman clutched her purse to her chest, shaking her head slowly at the scene unfolding before her. "Last chance," Mercer said, straightening his uniform with shaking hands. "Remove that medal and leave, or we'll remove you." The officers tightened their circle around Imani. Someone in the crowd said, "I'm calling the news." Another voice, "This is all going online." Malik's voice echoed back from the corridor they'd taken him down. "Aunt Imani, don't let them win." Imani stood in the center of the gathering storm, her posture straight, her eyes forward, the Purple Heart catching the light like a small flame on her chest. The same steady hands that had patched up wounded soldiers under fire, that had earned her medals they now claimed she stole, remained loose at her sides. Ready. Waiting. The combat veteran in her assessed angles, distances, witnesses. The woman in her felt the familiar weight of other people's assumptions crushing down. The aunt in her heard her nephew's pain and fury. The officers moved closer, hands reaching, as the public spectacle of her humiliation reached its peak. The lobby had become a pressure cooker, with Imani at its center. Officers formed a tight circle around her, their shadows stretching across the polished floor like bars of a cage. The morning light streaming through the high windows seemed to dim, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Mercer's face had turned a dangerous shade of red. "Remove her," he ordered through clenched teeth. A young officer to Imani's left shifted uncertainly, his hand hovering over his belt. The crowd pressed against the walls, phones raised like silent witnesses. Someone's child started crying, the sound sharp against the tension. Imani didn't move. Her military bearing showed in every line of her body. The squared shoulders, the centered balance, the calm focus of someone who had faced worse storms than this. The Purple Heart on her lapel caught the light, a small burst of color against her dark blazer. "I said remove her!" Mercer's voice cracked with frustration. The main doors swung open, bringing a rush of morning air and movement. Admiral Hail strode in, his dress uniform immaculate, flanked by 2 aides and several officials in suits. His presence commanded immediate attention, drawing eyes away from the standoff. Then the Admiral stopped, his gaze locked onto Imani, recognition lighting his features. Without hesitation, he changed course, moving directly toward her. The crowd parted instinctively before his authority. Officers stepped back, uncertain, creating a channel through their circle. Hail halted 3 paces from Imani, his spine straightened, shoulders squared. In one fluid motion, he raised his hand in a precise, formal salute. The lobby fell silent. Even the constant hum of the building's ventilation seemed to fade away. Imani returned the salute with perfect form, muscle memory from years of service taking over. "Combat Medic Rhodes," Hale's voice carried clearly through the hushed space. "I didn't expect to find you here." Mercer's mouth opened and closed, no sound emerging. Other officers began to shift uncomfortably, looking between their colleague and the decorated SEAL commander. "Admiral Hail!" Imani acknowledged, her voice steady. "The last time I saw you," Hail continued, his words measured and deliberate, "you were pulling wounded men to safety under heavy fire. 3 of them would have died without your intervention." He turned slightly, ensuring his voice carried to every corner of the lobby. "I know, because I was there." A murmur ran through the crowd. Phones adjusted their angles, capturing every word. "Your actions that day saved lives, including men under my command." Hale's eyes flicked to the Purple Heart, then to Mercer. That medal wasn't given lightly. It was earned with blood and courage. Mercer had backed up a step, his earlier bravado crumbling. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the building's air conditioning. The other officers had created distance between themselves and him, no one wanting to be associated with his mistake. "Sir," Mercer started, his voice weak, "we had no way of knowing." "No way of knowing?" Hale's tone could have frozen flame. "Except for the military ID she carries, the documentation in your courthouse files, the Purple Heart itself, which you were about to forcibly remove from a decorated combat veteran." The crowd had grown. Court staff lingered in doorways. A bailiff stood watching, keys frozen mid-jingle. The maintenance worker had stopped buffing the floor entirely, his machine silent. "I've submitted commendations for fewer acts of valor than I witnessed from Combat Medic Rhodes," Hale continued. "She didn't just save lives. She did it while taking fire, with complete disregard for her own safety. The kind of courage that marks the finest traditions of military service." Each word landed like a hammer blow on Mercer's authority. The officer seemed to shrink, his uniform suddenly looking too large for his frame. Just as the tension began to ease, Chief Lila Grayson emerged from a side corridor. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor as she approached, her face a mask of professional concern. "What seems to be the situation here?" Her voice was smooth, controlled, too controlled. "Chief Grayson," one of the officers started to explain. "A simple misunderstanding, I'm sure." Grayson cut him off, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Officer Mercer was just following security protocols. Perhaps we could discuss this in my office, Ms. Rhodes?" "That's Combat Medic Rhodes," Hale corrected firmly. "Of course." Grayson's smile tightened. "Officers, please escort Combat Medic Rhodes to the conference room. We'll sort this out properly." She turned to the crowd. "The show's over, folks. Please put your phones away. Recording isn't permitted in the courthouse." 2 officers, not Mercer, moved to flank Imani. Their postures were apologetic rather than aggressive, but the intent was clear. She was being removed from public view. "Wait," Imani said, her voice carrying. "My nephew's hearing." "Ah, yes." Grayson consulted a tablet one of her staff had rushed over. "It seems there's been a development. New evidence has come to light that requires review. The hearing will need to be rescheduled." "New evidence?" Imani's composure cracked slightly. "What evidence?" "Security footage that places your nephew at the scene of the alleged assault." Grayson's voice was pure bureaucratic efficiency. "Given this development, the judge has revoked bail pending further investigation." From down the corridor came the sound of Malik's voice, raised in protest, then muffled. The heavy door to the holding area closed with a final-sounding thud. The conference room felt like a tomb. Fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the institutional gray walls as Imani sat with perfect posture, her hands folded on the scratched wooden table. Through the narrow window in the door, she watched guards escort Malik down the hallway, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The public defender, James Morris, shuffled through papers with trembling hands. Sweat dotted his hairline despite the room's chill. "The prosecution claims they've uncovered security footage from the parking structure," he explained, his voice thin. "It allegedly shows Mr. Rhodes confronting Mr. Dunn near his vehicle at 9:47 p.m. on the night in question." "That's impossible," Malik said from his seat between 2 officers. His wrists were bound in front of him, the metal catching the unflattering light. I was home that night. I was grading papers until midnight. Chief Grayson stood at the head of the table, arms crossed. Her pearl necklace gleamed like armor. The footage is quite clear, Mr. Rhodes. Then it's fake, Malik insisted. His voice cracked. I never touched Mr. Dunn. I only spoke to him once, at the tenant meeting. The tenant meeting where you threatened him? Grayson interrupted smoothly. I didn't threaten anyone. Malik's chair scraped against the floor as he leaned forward. The officers tensed. I told him forcing elderly residents out of their homes in winter was wrong. That's all. Imani studied the faces around the table. Morris wouldn't meet her eyes. Grayson's expression was carved from stone. The officers looked uncomfortable but resigned. Only Admiral Hail, who had quietly followed them into the room, seemed fully alert to the wrongness of it all. May we see this footage? Imani asked, keeping her voice steady. The evidence will be properly presented at trial, Grayson replied. For now, given the serious nature of the assault charges and this new corroborating evidence, the judge has determined Mr. Rhodes poses a flight risk. Flight risk? Imani's fingers tightened around each other. He's a school counselor. His whole life is here. A school counselor who allegedly attacked a prominent businessman, Grayson corrected. The severity of the charges must be considered. Morris cleared his throat. Perhaps, if we could review the footage now, we might be able to clear up any misunderstanding. Proper channels, Mr. Morris. Grayson's tone could have frozen water. You know the procedures. Admiral Hail, who had been watching silently from near the door, stepped forward. Chief Grayson, given the circumstances of this morning's incident, perhaps some flexibility. With all due respect, Admiral, Grayson cut in, your presence here is courtesy. This is a criminal matter under local jurisdiction. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Hale's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. He moved closer to Imani's chair, his presence solid as a wall at her back. Combat Medic Rhodes, he said quietly. I don't believe in coincidences. Not in war, and not in courthouses. Grayson's polished smile tightened. Admiral, I must insist. The timing is remarkable, Hale continued, ignoring her. New evidence appears precisely when questions arise about courthouse conduct. A young man who challenged a developer's actions suddenly faces assault charges. And when his aunt arrives to support him, wearing proof of her service, she's immediately confronted and discredited. You're implying something very serious, Admiral, Grayson said. Her voice had gone flat. I'm observing patterns, Chief Grayson. The same way I observed them in combat. The same way Combat Medic Rhodes learned to spot them while treating the wounded. He placed a hand on the back of Imani's chair. Patterns that often reveal hidden truths. Morris was practically squirming in his seat now, eyes darting between Grayson and the door. The officers looked equally uncomfortable, but their training held them in place. Mr. Rhodes, Grayson announced, cutting through the tension, will be transferred to county holding pending trial. His attorney can file any relevant motions through proper channels. She nodded to the officers. We're done here. Wait, Malik said, as the officers moved to help him up. Aunt Imani. No contact, Grayson ordered. Standard procedure for revoked bail. Imani stood, her chair scraping back. Every military instinct screamed at her to move, to act, to protect. But she held herself still, knowing any reaction would only make things worse for Malik. The officers guided Malik toward the door. He twisted to look back at her, his eyes wide with fear he was trying hard to hide. In that moment, he looked so young. The same expression he'd worn as a child when neighborhood bullies would chase him home. Imani met his gaze steadily. She gave him a single, firm nod. The message was clear. I'm here. I see what's happening. I won't let this stand. Malik straightened slightly, drawing strength from her certainty. Then he was gone, led away down the sterile hallway toward the holding cells. Combat Medic Rhodes, Grayson said, gathering her files. "I trust there won't be any further disruptions in my courthouse." Imani turned to face her. She kept her voice perfectly level, her military bearing intact. "No disruptions, Chief Grayson, just truth." "Truth is determined in court," Grayson replied, "through proper channels." She moved to the door, then paused. "And combat medic Rhodes? I strongly suggest you leave that medal at home next time you visit. We wouldn't want another misunderstanding." The threat was clear beneath the professional veneer. But Imani had faced worse than bureaucrats with power complexes. She remained standing, straight-backed and unwavering, as Grayson left the room. The public records office smelled of dust and old paper. Imani sat at a scratched wooden desk, carefully filling out complaint forms under flickering fluorescent lights. Her handwriting remained steady, even as her anger simmered beneath the surface. The clock on the wall ticked past noon, its rhythm matching her precise documentation of the morning's events. She detailed everything: Mercer's aggressive approach, his public accusations, his attempt to grab her medal. The forms asked for witnesses. She listed dozens. The entire lobby had watched. Let them try to bury this. "You're wasting your time with those," a voice said from behind her. Imani turned to find an older Latina woman watching her from the doorway. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and despite her casual clothes, she carried herself with the unmistakable authority of someone who knew the system inside and out. "Rosa Delgado," the woman introduced herself, stepping into the room. "I was a clerk here for 27 years before retiring last spring." She picked up one of Imani's completed forms, scanning it with practiced eyes. "These complaints? They have a way of getting lost." "Nothing gets lost forever," Imani replied, continuing to write. "Everything leaves a trail." Rosa's mouth curved in a slight smile. "True. But first you have to know where to look." She pulled up a chair, her movements deliberate. "I saw what happened in the lobby. Not the first time I've seen Mercer throw his weight around, especially with people of color. But it might be the first time someone stood up to him with the right backing." Imani set down her pen. "You've seen this pattern before?" "Pattern?" Rosa snorted. "It's more like a system. Mercer intimidates people. Grayson covers it up. Complaints disappear, and everyone pretends nothing happened." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "But you're different. You've got that admiral in your corner, and more importantly, you know how to fight." "I need the lobby security footage," Imani said. "All angles, all cameras. Already requested it through official channels." When Imani nodded, Rosa shook her head. "Then it's probably being reviewed for security concerns right now. That's how they buy time to edit or lose anything inconvenient." The pen creaked in Imani's grip. "They can't just erase what dozens of people witnessed." "No, but they can make it complicated. Blur the timeline, question memories, suggest different interpretations." Rosa's eyes narrowed. "The real question is why they're working so hard to discredit you right when your nephew's case takes a suspicious turn." Before Imani could respond, Admiral Hail appeared in the doorway. His uniform seemed to fill the small space with authority. Rosa stood quickly, but not out of intimidation, more like professional respect. "Combat Medic Rhodes," Hail said formally. "A moment?" Imani gathered her papers and followed him to a quiet corner of the records room. Rosa remained nearby, pretending to browse files while clearly listening. "I have a contact," Hail said quietly. "Someone in federal oversight who's been investigating certain patterns in this courthouse's handling of cases involving property developers." "The same developers my nephew challenged?" Imani asked. Hail nodded. "But tread carefully. The more connections you uncover, the more dangerous this becomes. These people aren't just protecting Mercer's pride anymore. They're protecting serious money and influence." "I won't back down," Imani stated. "Didn't expect you to," Hail replied with a grim smile. "That's not who you are. Never was. Not even when we were under fire. He handed her a business card. My contact's name is Diana Chen. Don't call from your personal phone. Rosa approached them, her face serious. Admiral, if I may, I know where they keep the backup surveillance archives, the ones they don't like to admit exist. She turned to Imani. And I know which clerks might be willing to help, off the record. Why are you helping me? Imani asked. Because I spent 27 years watching injustice hide behind procedure, Rosa answered. Because I saw too many people get crushed by this system. And because when that man tried to strip away your dignity in public, you showed exactly what kind of fighter you are. Hale checked his watch. I have to return to the federal building. But remember, careful steps, secure communications. He met Imani's eyes. They're expecting you to charge in angry. Don't give them what they expect. After he left, Rosa pulled a notepad from her purse. Here's my number, and a list of people who might be willing to talk. Other victims of Mercer's bullying who filed complaints that vanished. Build your case quietly. Document everything. Imani gathered her completed forms. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Rosa warned. This is just the beginning. They're going to come at you from angles you don't expect. They'll try to isolate you, discredit you, wear you down. They can try, Imani said, standing. She walked through the courthouse's maze of hallways, past the lobby where Mercer had confronted her just hours ago. Officials and lawyers streamed past, everyone locked in their own dramas of justice and procedure. But now she saw it differently. Not just a building of law, but a web of power protecting itself. The afternoon sun hit her face as she emerged from the courthouse. She squinted against the brightness, feeling the weight of the Purple Heart still pinned to her blazer. Let them try to bury this. Let them try to silence her. She had survived war zones and battlefield trauma. She had saved lives under fire. This was a different kind of battle, but the stakes were just as real. Her nephew's freedom, her own dignity, and justice for everyone else these people had trampled. She reached into her pocket, feeling the business card Hale had given her and the list of names from Rosa. Imani's key scraped in the lock of her front door as evening shadows stretched across her porch. The day's tension sat heavy in her shoulders. Inside, her usually welcoming home felt different, like a fortress she needed to secure. She double-checked the locks, drawing the curtains against the deepening dusk. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Is this Ms. Rhodes? The voice was male, deliberately pitched low. Smart people know when to let things go. Your nephew could have a much easier time if you'd stop making waves. Imani's jaw tightened. Who is this? Just someone who thinks you should consider what's best for everyone. Drop the complaint. Stop asking questions. Some things are bigger than your hurt feelings about this morning. The line went dead. She had barely set the phone down when it rang again. Different number, same message. Back off. Let it go. Think about the consequences. 3 more calls followed while she tried to heat up leftover soup. Each one more pointed than the last. The final caller didn't bother with subtle threats. You're going to get that boy hurt if you don't shut up. The soup went cold, untouched. At 7:45 p.m., a call finally came from the county jail. Malik's voice shook, despite his effort to sound calm. Aunt Imani? Something happened. She gripped the phone tighter. Are you hurt? Just scraped up. Some guys jumped me in the yard. Said I needed to tell my aunt to mind her business. His breath hitched. Guards didn't see anything, of course. Put me in isolation for my protection. But it feels more like punishment. Malik, listen to me. They said next time would be worse, he cut in. Way worse. Aunt Imani, maybe we should just stop. Maybe if we cooperate, show we're not causing trouble. No. Her voice was steel. That's exactly what they want. To scare us into silence while they bury you under false charges. But they're winning. They can reach me in here anytime they want, and now they're coming after you, too. "They're not winning," she said firmly. "They're desperate. Think about it. If they were winning, they wouldn't need these tactics. They wouldn't be trying so hard to shut us up." A guard's voice interrupted, announcing time was up. "Stay strong," Imani said quickly. "I love you. Trust me." After hanging up, she opened her laptop, intending to research similar cases of courthouse corruption. Instead, she found her name already trending in local social media circles. Someone had leaked portions of her military medical records, carefully selected to paint her as unstable. Comments questioned her mental fitness. Others suggested her combat experience had made her paranoid and quick to see threats where none existed. A local news site had already picked up the story. Questions emerge about veterans' courthouse claims. The article quoted unnamed sources, suggesting she had exaggerated her service record and medical history. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rosa. "Turn on Channel 8. There was Mercer, dressed in civilian clothes, looking appropriately somber for the cameras. The chyron below him read, "Courthouse officer speaks out about veteran confrontation." "I have nothing but respect for our veterans," he was saying, his voice practiced and smooth. "That's why it pains me when someone appears to be using military honors inappropriately. As a security officer, I have a duty to investigate suspicious behavior." Ms. Rhodes became confrontational when asked for simple verification. "She actually grabbed my arm." Imani muted the TV, her hands shaking with controlled rage. On screen, Mercer continued his performance, playing the reasonable authority figure concerned about maintaining order. Her phone lit up again. "Rosa, they're following the playbook. Discredit the victim. Control the narrative. Make you look unstable." Another text followed. "Don't respond publicly yet. Let them think it's working." Imani walked to her bedroom, where her dress uniform hung in the closet. Her service medals caught the lamplight, each one earned through blood and courage and sacrifice. The Purple Heart waited on her dresser where she'd placed it after returning home. She lifted it, feeling its weight. The medal that had sparked this morning's confrontation. The symbol they'd tried to strip away. In the mirror above her dresser, she watched herself pin it back on her blazer, her movements precise and deliberate. Her reflection showed a woman they couldn't intimidate. Not with threats, not with lies, not with twisted media narratives. The phone rang again. Unknown number. This time, she answered with cold clarity. "Every threat you make is one more piece of evidence. Every call, every accident in jail, every leaked record. You're just building my case for me. Keep going." She hung up before they could respond. Her laptop chimed with an email notification. More photos from her military file, along with a message. "Back off, or everything goes public." She didn't bother reading further. Let them dig. Let them twist the truth. Let them try to paint her as unstable or aggressive or unreliable. She knew who she was. More importantly, she knew who they were. And now they were showing their hand. In the mirror, she straightened the Purple Heart, making sure it sat perfectly level. They thought they could pressure her into removing it this morning. Now they thought they could pressure her into hiding it away, into becoming small and quiet and afraid. She met her own eyes in the reflection. The woman looking back had navigated battlefields under fire, had made life-and-death decisions while bullets flew, had earned every medal through actions they couldn't erase or rewrite, no matter how hard they tried. This was no longer just about a public insult or even her nephew's freedom. This was about power, who wielded it, who abused it, and who refused to bow to it. Her phone buzzed again. She let it ring. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cafe's worn linoleum floor as Imani slid into a corner booth. Steam rose from her untouched coffee while she waited, her fingers drumming against a manila folder thick with courthouse documents. Rosa Delgado arrived 5 minutes early, carrying her own weathered briefcase. Her careful movements and sharp eyes betrayed decades of experience navigating the courthouse's hidden machinery. She settled across from Imani, immediately pulling out stacks of papers. "They made mistakes," Rosa said, keeping her voice low despite the nearly empty cafe. "They always do when they rush a frame job." Imani leaned forward. "Show me." Rosa spread several documents across the table, pointing to highlighted timestamps. "Look at the security logs from the day they claim Malik assaulted Harold Dunn. The footage they're using shows Malik in the East Corridor at 2:15 p.m. But the building access logs show him entering through the main entrance at 2:25 p.m. 10 minutes he was supposedly in two places at once," Imani muttered, studying the papers. "It gets worse," Rosa continued, pulling out more records. The surveillance footage file properties show it was modified 3 days after the alleged incident. Someone edited that video. Imani's coffee grew cold as they dug deeper. The inconsistencies multiplied like cracks in thin ice. Timestamps didn't align. Witness statements contradicted official reports. Security personnel work schedules had been altered after the fact. "Here's what doesn't make sense," Imani said, spreading out her own papers. "Why Malik? Why now? He's a school counselor with a clean record. What makes him dangerous enough to frame?" Rosa's eyes narrowed. What was he working on before this happened? He mentioned organizing residents at the Riverside Apartments, senior housing complex. Imani pulled out her phone, scrolling through texts from Malik. The developer, Harold Dunn, was forcing them out for some luxury conversion project. The same Harold Dunn who claims Malik assaulted him? Yes, but... Imani stopped scrolling, her expression hardening. "Wait. 3 weeks ago, Malik sent me a video. He was documenting how they were pressuring the seniors. Look at this." She held out her phone. The shaky footage showed an elderly woman in tears as men in suits demanded she sign paperwork. In the background, Harold Dunn's voice could be heard. "Either take the offer or get nothing. Your choice." Rosa watched intently. That would be valuable evidence in a tenant rights case. Malik had more videos. He was building a file, gathering statements from residents. Imani's voice tightened. "The day before his arrest, he told me he was bringing everything to legal aid. And suddenly, he's in jail. His reputation destroyed, labeled as violent." Rosa shook her head. Classic silencing tactic. A waitress approached to refill their coffees. They waited until she left before continuing. "The seniors at Riverside, what happened to them?" Rosa asked. "Most got forced out. One died after they moved her to temporary housing. Mrs. Chen. Heart attack." Imani's hands clenched. "She was 92. The stress. Was there an investigation? They ruled it natural causes. But Malik was furious. He had evidence the building they moved her to was unsafe. No working heat, black mold." Imani pulled out more papers. He filed complaints with the housing authority, called for inspections, was organizing the remaining residents to testify about conditions. Rosa sorted through court schedules. "There's a hearing next month about the Riverside development permits. If those seniors testified about displacement tactics and unsafe conditions, it would cost Harold Dunn millions." Imani sat back. And now the main organizer is in jail, his credibility shot, facing assault charges. The morning crowd began filtering into the cafe. Business people grabbing coffee. Courthouse employees heading to work. They lowered their voices further. "We need to find those residents," Rosa said. "The ones who haven't been forced out yet. They could verify Malik's documentation. If they'll talk. After what happened to him." "Fear works both ways," Rosa pointed out. "Right now, they're afraid of Dunn. But if they see someone fighting back, standing up..." Imani nodded slowly. "We also need the original security footage, unedited. I might know someone in IT. They keep backup files for system audits." Rosa began gathering the papers. "But we have to move carefully. The more we dig, the more dangerous this gets. They're already coming after us. Might as well make it count." Rosa paused, studying Imani's face. You know they'll escalate. What they did to your military records, the threats, that was just the start. I know. Imani's voice was steel. But they picked this fight. And unlike those seniors, I can fight back. They organized the documents into clear evidence groups, timestamp discrepancies, altered logs, witness statement contradictions, and Malik's Riverside documentation. Rosa made copies, explaining they needed multiple sets in different locations. Never keep everything in one place, she advised. They're good at making evidence disappear. The cafe had filled up. Through the window, they could see people streaming into the courthouse across the street. Among them were the same officers who had tried to humiliate Imani yesterday. I'll start with the IT contact, Rosa said quietly. You focus on finding those residents, but be careful how you approach them. They're already traumatized. Imani gathered the documents, securing them in her briefcase. The weight of the papers felt like ammunition. They thought framing Malik would bury this whole thing. Instead, they just gave us a reason to dig deeper. She stood, straightening her blazer where the Purple Heart still sat prominently displayed. Yesterday, they had tried to strip away her honor. Today, she would use that same strength to expose their corruption. Through the cafe window, the courthouse loomed like a fortress. But fortresses could fall. Sometimes all it took was finding the right crack in the wall. The Paradise Inn hadn't seen paradise in decades. Paint peeled from its two-story facade like dead skin, and the neon sign flickered weakly even in broad daylight. The parking lot was a patchwork of cracked asphalt and weeds, with a collection of rusted cars that looked like they hadn't moved in months. Imani checked the address Rosa had given her again. Room 217. The metal stairs creaked under her feet as she climbed to the second floor, where a row of identical doors stretched into shadow despite the late morning sun. The air smelled of mildew and cheap cleaning products. She found 217 at the far end. A small wind chime made from sea glass hung beside the door. A touch of beauty in this dreary place. Imani knocked softly. Who is it? A wavering voice called from inside. Mrs. Price? I'm Imani Rhodes, Malik's aunt. He told me about you. There was a long pause, then the sound of multiple locks being undone. The door opened just enough to reveal an elderly black woman with carefully styled silver hair. Despite her surroundings, Evelyn Price wore a pressed blouse and neat slacks, her dignity intact. Recognition flickered in her eyes. Malik spoke about you. The veteran. She opened the door wider. Please, come in. Though I apologize for the state of things. The room was small, but meticulously organized. A single bed took up most of the space, with a kitchenette crammed in one corner. Family photos and a cross hung on the walls, trying to make this temporary space feel like home. A portable heater hummed in the corner, fighting against the autumn chill that seeped through thin walls. Would you like some tea? Evelyn asked, already moving to the hot plate on the counter. I don't get many visitors these days. Thank you. That would be nice. Imani sat in one of two plastic chairs by a small table. How long have you been here, Mrs. Price? 3 months. Evelyn's hands shook slightly as she prepared the tea, since they forced us out of Riverside. 47 years I lived in that apartment. Raised my children there. Now, look at me. She gestured at the room. They call this temporary housing while they process our applications for new places. But nothing ever gets processed, does it? Imani accepted the cup of tea. Malik was trying to help with that. That boy has a heart of gold. Evelyn sat across from her, her own tea untouched. He didn't just file paperwork. He listened, brought us groceries when the food money ran low, helped Mrs. Chen with her medication before. She trailed off, pain crossing her face. I heard about Mrs. Chen, Imani said quietly. Malik was devastated. We all were. She was the heart of our floor. Always cooking for everyone, watching the children when mothers needed help. Evelyn's voice hardened. Then they move her here, to this place, with no elevator for her bad hip, no proper heating. 2 weeks later, she's gone. But they ruled it natural causes, so who cares about one more dead old woman? Imani leaned forward. Malik told me he was gathering evidence. About the conditions, the pressure tactics. Oh, yes. Evelyn stood and went to a drawer, pulling out a thick envelope. I kept copies of everything. The inspection reports he filed, photos of the code violations, records of every visit from Mr. Dunn's people. She sat back down, spreading papers across the table. They'd come at night sometimes, stand in the hallways, tell us we were being selfish, keeping prime real estate from development. Said we were hurting the community by staying. She pulled out a photo showing water damage and black mold in a corner. When we complained about conditions, repairs mysteriously took weeks. The heat would go out in winter. The hot water would stop. But if we agreed to take their buyout offer? Suddenly, everything worked fine for a few days. Pressure tactics, Imani said, examining the documents. Malik documented it all. He was building a case, he said. Had videos of their threats, testimony from residents. Evelyn's hands trembled as she gathered the papers back into the envelope. Then suddenly, he's arrested for attacking Mr. Dunn? The same man he caught on video, threatening an 80-year-old woman? She shook her head. We all knew what really happened. Did anyone else see these videos? Most were on his phone. But he backed everything up, he said. Kept copies somewhere safe. Evelyn looked around nervously before lowering her voice. The day before they arrested him, he told me he had proof of money changing hands. Bribes to ignore violations. He was so excited, said it was the key to everything. Imani made notes on her phone. Would you be willing to testify about what you've seen? About the conditions here? The intimidation? Fear flickered across Evelyn's face. After what they did to Malik? I know it's asking a lot, Imani said gently. But your testimony, combined with these documents, it could expose everything. Help Malik and stop them from doing this to other people. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, staring at the envelope. Finally, she squared her shoulders. My husband fought in Vietnam, came home with medals, just like you. But when he needed housing help in his final years, they treated him like garbage, said his paperwork was missing, made him jump through hoops until he was too sick to fight anymore. She met Imani's eyes. I'm tired of them thinking they can treat us this way because we're old, or poor, or black, like we haven't earned our place in this world. She pushed the envelope across the table. Take copies of everything. And yes, I'll testify. Not just for Malik, for Mrs. Chen, for my Harold, for all of us they thought they could just sweep aside. Imani carefully tucked the envelope into her bag. This was no longer just about clearing Malik's name. It was about a system that saw human beings as obstacles to profit. That counted on people being too beaten down, too afraid to fight back. Rosa's apartment was a fortress of filing cabinets and banker's boxes. Every surface held stacks of papers, sticky notes, and manila folders. The afternoon sun streamed through dusty Venetian blinds, creating stripes of light across the dining table where Imani and Rosa hunched over courthouse records. Look at this, Rosa said, pointing to a security log. The timestamp here shows Malik entering the East Corridor at 2:15 p.m. But this other log has him in the main lobby at the exact same time. She pulled out another document. And here's the kicker. The surveillance footage they're using shows him supposedly attacking Dunn at 2:17 p.m. near the parking structure. Imani frowned, spreading the papers wider. He can't be in 3 places at once. Exactly. Rosa grabbed her reading glasses, squinting at the fine print. I've seen doctored logs before, but they usually do a better job hiding it. This was rushed. Sloppy. The afternoon had turned into a crash course in courthouse documentation. Rosa knew every form, every procedure, Every way records could be manipulated. 25 years as a clerk had taught her where bodies got buried in paperwork. Here's another oddity, Rosa continued, pulling a thick file from a nearby stack. Building maintenance contracts for the courthouse. Look who got the bid 3 years ago. Imani leaned in. Summit Security Solutions, a subsidiary of Duncorp Development, our friend Harold's company. Rosa tapped the page. They handle all electronic security. Cameras, door locks, access systems. Convenient, isn't it? So Dunn's people control who sees what in the courthouse? Imani's voice tightened with anger. And who gets in where? Rosa stood, stretching her back. Want some coffee? This next part gets interesting. While Rosa shuffled to her tiny kitchen, Imani's phone buzzed. A message from Admiral Hail's investigator. Financial records came through. Call when safe. Imani stepped onto Rosa's small balcony for privacy, the traffic noise rising from the street below. The investigator answered on the first ring. Ms. Rhodes, we found something in Chief Grayson's department finances. Large consulting payments to a company called Riverside Holdings, LLC. Riverside? Imani's pulse quickened. That's where Dunn's development project is. Exactly. The payments started right after Summit Security got the courthouse contract. Monthly transfers, always just under the amount that would trigger oversight review. Imani watched a police car cruise by below. How much total? Over 3 years? Close to $500,000. All marked as security consultation services, but we can't find any actual services rendered. Kickbacks, Imani said flatly. Looks that way. There's more. Riverside Holdings shares an address with 3 other shell companies, all tied to Duncorp, all receiving regular payments from different courthouse departments. Rosa appeared at the balcony door with 2 coffee mugs, raising an eyebrow. Imani thanked the investigator and ended the call. Good news? Rosa asked, handing her a mug. Imani relayed the conversation as they returned to the dining table. Rosa's eyes lit up. That matches what I found in the vendor payment records. She dug through another pile, extracting several spreadsheets. See these maintenance invoices? They're all inflated. Standard security camera replacement runs about $2,000. They're billing $5,000 per unit. Where's the extra money going? Through a maze of subcontractors, but Rosa traced a pattern through the documents. It all leads back to companies connected to Dunn. And guess who signs off on every invoice? Grayson, Imani said. Got it in one. Rosa sat back, satisfied. She's been helping Dunn milk the courthouse budget for years. No wonder she jumped in so quick when you caused a scene in the lobby. You threatened to draw attention to their whole operation. Imani sipped her coffee, thinking. So when Malik started gathering evidence about Dunn's tenant intimidation, he accidentally stumbled onto something bigger. Rosa nodded. Dunn couldn't risk Malik's investigation exposing the courthouse connection, so they framed him, using their control of the security systems to manufacture evidence. They spent the next hour mapping connections on Rosa's whiteboard. Companies linked to payments. Dates matched to events. A pattern emerged of systematic corruption, with Dunn at the center and Grayson as his courthouse enforcer. The altered security logs are our strongest proof, Rosa said, capping her marker. They show direct manipulation of evidence. If we can prove Grayson ordered those changes, we need someone on the inside, Imani mused. Someone who actually handled the alterations. Rosa smiled slyly. You mean someone like Marcus from IT? Who still owes me for covering up his 3-hour lunch breaks last year? You really do know everyone's secrets, don't you? 25 years, honey. You learn who's honest and who's flexible. Rosa checked her watch. Marcus gets off at 5. Give me an hour with him, maybe some pizza and beer. He'll tell us who gave the order to doctor those logs. Imani studied the whiteboard, where red lines connected Dunn's shell companies to courthouse payments. The web of corruption was finally becoming clear. Each new piece of evidence strengthened their case. For the first time since Malik's arrest, she felt the weight lifting slightly. "We're getting close," Rosa said softly. "They're not as untouchable as they think." Imani touched the purple heart pinned to her blazer. "No one is. They just count on people being too afraid to prove it." The afternoon sun had shifted, lighting up their evidence wall like a spotlight. In the harsh glare, years of greed and corruption were laid bare, waiting to be exposed. The evening news anchor's face filled the screen in Imani's living room. Behind her, footage from the courthouse lobby played. Blurry cell phone video showing Officer Mercer confronting Imani about her Purple Heart. "Breaking news tonight as shocking footage emerges from the county courthouse," the anchor said. Multiple sources confirm that decorated Army combat veteran Imani Rhodes was publicly harassed and accused of stolen valor while attempting to attend her nephew's hearing. The report cut to Admiral Hail in his dress uniform, speaking from the steps of the federal building. Sergeant Rhodes served with distinction. She saved countless lives under fire. The treatment she received is not just an insult to her service. It's an insult to every veteran who's worn the uniform. Imani watched from her couch, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Rosa sat beside her, taking notes. The story continued rolling out. The suspicious timing of Malik's arrest, the questionable new evidence, the connections between developer Harold Dunn and courthouse contracts. The reporter detailed the mounting inconsistencies in the security logs and questioned the sudden bail revocation. Sources inside the courthouse confirm that Officer Dale Mercer has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The anchor continued. Chief of Security Lila Grayson faces mounting questions about altered surveillance footage and financial irregularities within her department. Rosa nudged Imani's arm. "Look at the crawler. They're showing the real numbers from those security contracts." The bottom of the screen displayed figure after figure, inflated invoices, suspicious payments, shell company connections. What had been buried in paperwork was now scrolling across thousands of screens. "Multiple watchdog groups are calling for external oversight," the anchor said. "The State Judicial Conduct Board has announced an emergency review of recent cases handled by—" Imani's phone buzzed. It was Malik's public defender. "Ms. Rhodes, have you seen the news?" The lawyer sounded energized. "I'm filing for emergency bail reconsideration first thing tomorrow. With this much public scrutiny, they can't keep blocking us without explanation." "What are our chances?" Imani asked. "Better by the hour." The altered security logs alone raise serious questions about the evidence against Malik. And now that the media's connecting it to broader corruption allegations, he paused. Let's just say several judges are suddenly very interested in appearing transparent. After hanging up, Imani found herself fighting an unfamiliar sensation. Hope. She'd spent weeks pushing against what felt like an immovable wall. Now, hairline cracks were spreading through the courthouse's facade. Her phone kept lighting up with messages. Veterans groups offering support. Community organizations planning courthouse protests. Former tenants coming forward about Dunn's intimidation tactics. Courthouse employees sending anonymous tips about other covered-up incidents. The news segment ended with public reaction footage. People gathered outside the courthouse, some carrying signs. "Respect our veterans," and "End courthouse corruption." "They can't bury this anymore," Rosa said, gathering her notes. "Too many eyes watching now." "Grayson will try," Imani replied. "She's got too much to lose." "Sure, but she's not used to spotlight. Look." Rosa pointed to a clip of Grayson hurrying to her car, ignoring reporters' questions. "That's someone who prefers operating in shadows. Public pressure makes her sloppy." A text arrived from Admiral Hail. "Hold steady. More evidence coming through channels tomorrow." Imani allowed herself a small smile. After weeks of closed doors and circular explanations, truth was finally breaking through. She thought of Mercer, probably sitting at home watching the same broadcast, seeing his actions replayed and condemned. The next morning, Imani drove to the detention center for visitation. The guard's demeanor had shifted. Less dismissive, more careful. News travels fast. Malik arrived in the visiting room looking tired but alert. His eyes went straight to the Purple Heart on Imani's blazer. "You're still wearing it," he said as they sat down. "Always will." She studied his face. "You've seen the news?" He nodded. "Some of it. Guys in here were watching when the story broke. Even the guards were talking about it." He leaned forward. "Is it true? About Dunn and the contracts?" "That's just the surface," Imani said. "Rosa found more connections. The FBI's involved now, looking at the money trail. Your case kicked over a hornet's nest. What about Mercer?" "Suspended. Grayson's trying to distance herself, but she can't hide her department's involvement anymore." Imani reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "Your lawyer's filing for bail reconsideration today. The judges know they're being watched." For the first time since his arrest, Malik smiled. Not just with his mouth. His whole face lightened. "When you first got here that day, wearing this—" He touched the Purple Heart gently. "I was so proud to be your nephew. Then, when Mercer started in on you, I thought—" He shook his head. "I thought they were too strong, that fighting back would only make things worse." "That's what they count on," Imani said. "People staying quiet, staying scared. But you didn't. Neither did you. Standing up for those tenants, gathering evidence. You chose what's right over what's easy." She straightened in her chair. "We're gaining ground now. The truth's coming out, piece by piece." Malik's smile widened. "Aunt Imani? When I get out, maybe we could work together? Help other families dealing with this kind of thing?" His eyes were bright with purpose. "There's got to be more people stuck in the system, needing someone to fight for them." Imani felt warmth spread through her chest. This was her nephew. Not beaten, not broken, but thinking about helping others even while still behind bars. "First things first," she said. "Let's get you home. Then we'll talk about changing the world." The visiting room buzzed with other conversations, but in their corner, aunt and nephew sat in comfortable silence, sharing the first real hope they'd felt in weeks. The system hadn't won. The truth hadn't stayed buried. Sometimes all it took was one person refusing to back down, refusing to be silenced, to start an avalanche of change. The buzzing of Imani's phone jolted her awake. Notifications flooded her screen, missed calls, text messages, news alerts. Her stomach tightened as she opened the first link. The video played in crisp high definition. It showed the courthouse confrontation, but something was wrong. The angle was different, cropped tight on her hand catching Mercer's wrist. In this version, her movement looked sudden, aggressive. Mercer appeared to stumble backward. The audio had been cleaned up to emphasize his startled grunt. "Disturbing footage emerges casting doubt on veterans' claims," the caption read. Imani sat up, fully alert now. More notifications poured in. Links to articles with headlines that made her blood run cold. Questions arise about Purple Heart recipient's service record. Courthouse officer speaks out. "I was assaulted." Military honors under scrutiny. Did she earn them? Her phone rang. Rosa. "Don't look at social media," Rosa said immediately. "It's ugly out there. They're pushing a narrative hard." "Who's they?" "Everyone. News stations, commentators, online trolls. Someone leaked parts of your service record. The redacted sections about your medical discharge. They're twisting it, making you sound unstable." Imani's hands were steady as she opened her laptop, but her chest felt tight. The manipulation was precise, professional. Articles questioned her combat experience. Anonymous sources suggested she'd exaggerated her role in battlefield rescues. Mercer had given multiple interviews, portraying himself as a dedicated officer who'd simply been doing his job. "The video's the worst part," Rosa continued. "They edited out the beginning where Mercer approached you, made it look like you grabbed him first. Admiral Hail saw what happened. He was there ahead of that too, saying he was misled by your emotional appeal. Some are suggesting you used your position in veterans groups to build a false narrative. The doorbell rang. Imani approached cautiously, checking through the peephole. 2 reporters stood outside with cameras. Ms. Rhodes, can you respond to allegations about your service record? Did you assault Officer Mercer? What about claims you falsified military honors? She stepped back from the door, drawing the curtains. Her phone buzzed again. Malik's lawyer. I'm sorry, he said without preamble. I'm withdrawing from the case. What? My firm is receiving pressure from major clients. They're threatening to pull their business if I continue representing your nephew. His voice cracked. I have partners to consider. Staff who depend on those accounts. So you're abandoning Malik? I'll help transition to new counsel. But, he paused. Given the current climate, you might have trouble finding someone willing to take the case. Imani ended the call, her mind racing. The coordinated attack was too perfect, too thorough. Every angle of defense was being systematically dismantled. Her phone rang again. Rosa's voice was tight with urgency. Evelyn's gone. What do you mean, gone? Dead. Her neighbor found her this morning. They're saying it was a heart attack, but… Rosa took a shaky breath. The box of housing records she kept? The one with all the documentation about Dunn's threats? It's missing from her room. Imani sank into a chair. Evelyn had been their key witness, the living proof of what Dunn's development schemes had done to vulnerable residents. The news coverage grew worse throughout the day. Commentators picked apart her service history. Former courthouse employees emerged with stories questioning her behavior. Social media filled with skeptics and critics. Chief Grayson released a statement. In light of new evidence, we are conducting a thorough review of all security protocols and complaints. The safety of courthouse staff and visitors remains our primary concern. The subtext was clear. They were building a case against both Imani and Malik. By afternoon, the tide had fully turned. Veterans groups that had supported her now distanced themselves, citing unclear circumstances. Community organizations fell silent. The courthouse protest page disappeared from social media. A text arrived from Admiral Hail. They're pressuring my superiors. I'm being advised to avoid comment on ongoing investigations. I'm sorry. Malik called from detention. They're moving me, he said, his voice hollow. Different facility, higher security classification. The guards say it's for my protection, but… He fell silent for a moment. Maybe we should stop, Aunt Imani, before they hurt anyone else, before they come after you harder. Malik! I mean it. Evelyn's dead. Your reputation's being destroyed. All because I had to play hero and stand up to Dunn. His voice cracked. I can't have more deaths on my conscience. After the call, Imani sat in her darkening living room. The Purple Heart lay heavy in her palm, its surface catching the last light of day. The medal that had started everything. Her proof of service, her symbol of sacrifice, her reminder that truth should matter. Now it felt like a target. She thought of Evelyn, who'd died alone in a shabby motel room after being pushed from her home. Of Malik, being transferred to a harder facility because he'd tried to protect people like her. Of Rosa, risking her retirement by helping dig through records. Of all the people who dared to stand up, now being forced back down. The system wasn't just protecting itself, it was sending a message. Challenge power, and we will erase you. Not with violence, but with something more insidious. Doubt, discredit, isolation. Imani stared at the medal, remembering battlefields where at least the enemy had been clear. Here, in what was supposed to be Justice's house, the war was fought with paperwork and pixels, with twisted truths and convenient deaths. For the first time since returning home from combat, she felt truly alone. The coffee in Imani's cup had gone cold. She barely noticed, focused on the stack of maintenance logs Rosa had spread across the diner table. The morning rush had ended, leaving them mostly alone in the vinyl booth except for a few regulars nursing their drinks at the counter. "Look at this," Rosa said, tapping a line item with her pen. "Every slip-and-fall incident in the courthouse gets documented. Building services keeps separate records because of insurance requirements." Imani leaned forward. "And they use cameras? Floor buffers have them mounted now. Too many people were claiming injuries." Rosa circled a date. "The morning of your confrontation with Mercer, they had a crew working that lobby. Standard maintenance schedule. Why didn't we see them in the security footage? Because they started before public hours. But here's the thing. The buffer cameras run the whole time. Insurance protocol. They can't risk missing anything that might lead to a claim." Imani straightened, understanding dawning. So there might be another angle of what happened. Footage that wasn't controlled by courthouse security. Exactly. Rosa pulled out her phone. "I know the maintenance supervisor, Marcus. Been there 20 years. He's careful about keeping backups because he got blamed once for an accident that wasn't his fault." They found Marcus in the courthouse basement, organizing supplies in a cramped office. The walls were lined with cleaning equipment and boxes of paper towels. He looked up warily as they entered. "Rosa," he nodded. "Been a while. Need your help, Marcus." That morning 2 weeks ago, the lobby incident with the veteran. "Your crew was buffing floors?" He set down his clipboard. "Yeah. Joey was on the machine that day." His expression grew cautious. "Heard about what happened upstairs. Whole building's still talking about it." "We need to see the buffer camera footage," Imani said quietly. Marcus shook his head. "Look, I try to stay out of courthouse politics. Got a pension to protect." "Marcus," Rosa stepped closer. "Remember when they tried to pin that judge's fall on your team? Who pulled the old work orders proving the spill came from the cafe cart?" He sighed, glancing at the door. "Give me a minute." Marcus disappeared into a back storage room. They heard boxes being moved, then the click of a laptop opening. He emerged with the external hard drive. "Joey always dumps the footage here before clearing the machine's memory. Policy says we keep it 30 days. He hesitated. "What you're looking for, it might not show anything useful." "We'll take that chance," Imani said. They gathered around the laptop as Marcus pulled up the files. The footage was surprisingly clear. High-definition cameras mounted at multiple angles on the buffer to capture any potential hazards or incidents. "There," Rosa pointed. 7:42 a.m. That's when you entered the lobby. The buffer had been working near the elevator bank. Its cameras caught the scene from a lower angle than the courthouse security footage. They watched as Mercer spotted Imani, started shouting, and approached her. "Can you enhance the audio?" Imani asked. Marcus adjusted some settings. Mercer's voice came through clearly. "Take that off. You think you can just walk in here pretending to be something you're not?" The footage showed Mercer's finger jabbing toward Imani's chest, then his hand reaching for her medal. The movement was unmistakable. He initiated contact. Imani's blocking motion was purely defensive, but it was what happened next that made them all lean closer. Chief Grayson appeared in frame, speaking urgently to someone off camera. "Lock that down, all of it. Now." Her voice was distinct, authoritative. "And get me Dunn's number." "Dunn?" Marcus frowned. "The developer?" "Keep watching," Rosa urged. The footage continued. Harold Dunn himself appeared briefly in the background, far earlier than his official statement had claimed he arrived that day. He spoke with Grayson, their body language tense and conspiratorial. "There's more," Marcus said quietly. He switched to another camera angle, this one capturing the moment Malik was led past. "Watch the timestamp." The timestamp showed Malik arriving 5 minutes before the alleged assault on Dunn was supposed to have occurred. It would have been physically impossible for him to have been in two places at once. "The surveillance footage they're using against Malik," Imani said. It has to be doctored. Got to be, Rosa agreed. And now we know why Grayson moved so fast to contain everything. She was protecting more than just Mercer. Marcus ejected the hard drive, holding it out to Imani. I never gave you this. Far as anyone knows, the buffer memory auto-deleted after 24 hours, like usual. Imani took the drive carefully. Its weight felt significant in her palm, like the truth it contained might finally be heavy enough to tip the scales. Thank you, she said. He nodded. My brother served. Came back with medals too. What they did to you in that lobby. He shook his head. It wasn't right. They left Marcus's office, Rosa clutching the maintenance logs while Imani secured the drive in her bag. The basement hallway was quiet except for the distant hum of the building's heating system. We need to make copies, Rosa said. Multiple copies. Store them separately. Agreed. And we need to be careful who we show first. They'll try to bury this too if they can. But they can't. Rosa's voice held fierce satisfaction. Not this time. The footage is too clear. The audio, too damning. Mercer's aggression, Grayson's cover-up, Dunn's involvement. It's all there. Imani stopped walking, letting the reality of what they'd found sink in. After weeks of having her honor questioned, her service doubted, her character attacked, here was irrefutable proof. Not just of her innocence, but of the entire machinery working to grind down anyone who dared stand against it. She touched her blazer where the Purple Heart usually sat. She'd stopped wearing it after the media attacks began. But seeing the truth captured in that footage, her calm dignity in the face of Mercer's bullying, the evidence of Grayson's corruption, the proof of Malik's innocence, she knew it was time to pin it back on. The war wasn't over. But now, they had the ammunition to fight back. Late afternoon sun slanted through Venetian blinds, casting stripes across stacks of documents spread over the federal office's conference table. The room smelled of coffee and printer ink. Special Investigator Sarah Martinez methodically arranged papers in precise rows, each stack telling part of a larger story. Imani stood with her arms crossed, watching as Rosa leaned over a particularly dense collection of financial records. Admiral Hail sat quietly in the corner, his presence lending gravity to the proceedings. Let me walk you through what we've found, Martinez said, picking up the first set of documents. These are bank transfers from Dunn Development's primary accounts. She laid out a series of statements. Notice these payments to Clearview Maintenance Services and Superior Building Solutions. Rosa adjusted her reading glasses. Shell companies? Both incorporated 3 days apart, registered to empty offices in strip malls. Martinez tapped another document. The money flows through them, gets divided into smaller amounts, then redirects to various courthouse service contracts, all falling just under the threshold that would trigger automatic audits. Imani studied the patterns of numbers. And these connect to Grayson? Her department controls vendor approval. Martinez pulled out more papers. Every contractor that received these split payments was approved directly by her office, bypassing normal procurement channels. But here's where it gets interesting. She spread out a timeline of courthouse communications. Look at the dates and times. Rosa leaned closer. These align perfectly with when security logs were altered. Exactly. Martinez highlighted specific entries. Every time Dunn's shell companies processed payments, we see corresponding changes to courthouse records. Video files modified, access logs adjusted, timestamp corrections. The day Malik was arrested? Imani asked. Martinez nodded, pulling out a detailed timeline. 3 separate security log alterations within hours of his detention. Then immediate communications between Grayson's office and Dunn's personal number. She synced the maintenance footage on her laptop with the timeline. Watch the timestamps. The video played, showing Malik's actual arrival time. Now compare that to the doctored footage they're using against him. The manipulation is obvious once you align everything. Rosa pulled out her own notes. They violated at least 6 different procedural requirements just handling the evidence. Chain of custody is completely corrupted. Any decent judge would throw this out immediately. But that's not enough, Imani said firmly. Throwing it out quietly lets them try again with someone else. Someone without connections or resources to fight back. She straightened her shoulders. This needs to be public. All of it. Admiral Hail spoke for the first time. You understand what that means? These people have influence, money, political connections. They won't go down without trying to destroy anyone who exposes them. They already tried destroying my nephew. They tried stripping my dignity in public. Imani's voice was steady. I won't let them bury this in private settlements and sealed records. Martinez gathered another set of documents. We have enough to prove criminal conspiracy. The money trail alone shows clear intent. Add in the evidence tampering, witness intimidation, abuse of authority. She looked up at Imani. But the Admiral's right. Going public means they'll come at you hard. All of you. Rosa placed a hand on Imani's shoulder. We knew that risk when we started digging. I've watched them bury too many cases, silence too many people. Not this time. What's our next step? Imani asked. Martinez outlined the sequence. We file federal charges tomorrow morning, simultaneous with your nephew's emergency hearing. The timing has to be precise. We move before they can destroy more evidence or pressure more witnesses. They'll try to control the narrative immediately, Hale warned. Claim internal investigations are adequate. Paint this as disgruntled individuals exaggerating routine processes. Let them try, Imani said. We have proof, real proof, not just of what they did to Malik and me, but of years of corruption, of people losing their homes, their freedom, their dignity. All so men like Dunn could profit, and women like Grayson could protect their power. Rosa sorted through more documents, organizing them for tomorrow's filing. Every altered record, every hidden payment, every corrupted video. It all tells the same story. They thought nobody would look closely enough to connect it all. They thought wrong, Martinez said, closing her laptop. We move at 9 a.m. sharp. Everything gets filed simultaneously. Federal charges, evidence submissions, emergency motions. No chance for them to get ahead of it. The late afternoon sun had faded to dusk outside the office windows. Long shadows stretched across the conference table, now covered in evidence of corruption laid bare. Imani walked to the window, gazing out at the city lights beginning to flicker on. She reached into her bag and removed her Purple Heart. The metal caught the last rays of sunlight as she pinned it carefully to her blazer. Each motion was deliberate, practiced. The same way she'd pinned it on countless times before heading into difficult situations. The weight of it felt right, familiar. This was what it had always represented. Not just sacrifice, but the duty to stand against wrong. To fight not just for herself, but for everyone who couldn't fight back. Behind her, she could hear Rosa and Martinez gathering documents, preparing for tomorrow's battle. Admiral Hale's chair creaked as he stood, his reflection appearing in the window beside her. The city spread out below, unaware of what morning would bring. Somewhere out there, Malik waited in his cell. Elderly tenants huddled in motel rooms, clutching eviction notices. Courthouse staff carried secrets they were afraid to speak. Tomorrow would change that. Tomorrow, truth would step into the light. The morning sun streamed through tall courthouse windows, casting long rectangles of light across the packed gallery. Every wooden bench groaned under the weight of spectators pressed shoulder to shoulder. Elderly tenants, in their Sunday best, sat rigid and dignified despite their canes and walkers propped in the aisles. Community members who'd witnessed Imani's humiliation filled the back rows, many wearing veteran pins in solidarity. Reporters clutched notebooks, pens hovering in anticipation. At the defense table, Malik stood straight-backed in a crisp blue suit that couldn't hide the strain of his detention. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, But hope flickered there too as Imani took her place directly behind him. Her Purple Heart caught the morning light. Impossible to miss. Officer Mercer sat near the prosecution, jaw clenched. Chief Grayson maintained her usual polished composure, though her fingers drummed silently against her armrest. Harold Dunn's expensive suit and confident smirk suggested he still believed money could bury truth. Admiral Hail entered with Investigator Martinez, their presence drawing whispers from the gallery. Rosa slipped into a seat near the front, a thick binder of procedural violations ready in her lap. Judge Harrison's gavel cracked sharply. "We're here to address new evidence in the matter of Rhodes versus—" "Your Honor." Martinez stood, federal credentials displayed. "The United States government is intervening in these proceedings under federal corruption statutes. We have evidence of systematic criminal conspiracy involving multiple parties present in this courtroom." The judge's eyebrows rose as she reviewed the federal filing. Grayson half rose. "Your Honor, this is completely irregular." "Be seated, Chief Grayson. Federal jurisdiction supersedes your authority in this matter." Judge Harrison nodded to Martinez. "Proceed." Martinez activated the courtroom's display system. First, surveillance footage from a maintenance buffer camera, timestamp authenticated. The video played in perfect clarity. Mercer's aggressive approach toward Imani, his reach for her medal. Grayson arriving moments later, mouth moving as she directed evidence collection. In the background, Dunn's distinctive figure appeared far earlier than his sworn statement claimed. Gasps and murmurs filled the gallery. Mercer's face reddened. Grayson's practiced calm cracked slightly. "Note the timestamp correlation," Martinez continued, splitting the screen to show internal logs. Within minutes of this incident, security records began experiencing selective modifications. Each alteration traces to terminals under Chief Grayson's authority. She laid out financial documents next, walking the court through the money trail. Shell companies, divided payments, courthouse contracts, the web of influence bought and sold through carefully hidden transactions. Mr. Dunn's development firm routed over $2 million through fake maintenance companies, all feeding directly into courthouse operations controlled by Chief Grayson's department. Each payment corresponds to altered records or selective enforcement actions against development opponents. Dunn's smirk had vanished. His attorney scribbled furious notes. These communication logs show coordination between parties. Martinez highlighted specific exchanges. Note the pattern. Dunn identifies problems, payments process, records change, witnesses face selective prosecution. Mr. Rhodes's arrest fits this exact template after he documented tenant intimidation. Rosa approached the bench with her procedural analysis. Her quiet voice carried steel as she detailed each violation. Chain of custody broken. Access logs deleted. Timestamp authentication bypassed. Witness statements altered after filing. Every safeguard meant to prevent abuse was systematically dismantled. More evidence mounted. Witness statements from courthouse staff describing pressure to alter records. Documentation of other cases buried to protect Dunn's interests. Financial trails revealing how deep the corruption reached. Malik's timeline emerged pristine from the truth's harsh light. The alleged assault timing proved impossible, given verified security logs. His documented meetings with tenants aligned perfectly with their testimonies. Even his phone records supported his version of events. Mercer seemed to shrink with each new revelation. His earlier bravado crumbled as his own contradictory statements appeared side by side on the display screen. The officer who'd tried stripping Imani's dignity now couldn't meet her eyes. Grayson attempted damage control, rising again. "Your Honor, these allegations require proper investigation through internal—" "Chief Grayson!" Judge Harrison's voice cut like ice. "You will be silent. Your authority in this courthouse is suspended effective immediately." The judge studied the evidence before her, face hardening as the scope of corruption became clear. Each document added weight to the silence stretching through the courtroom. Finally, she removed her glasses and surveyed the room. Her gaze lingered on the elderly tenants, on Malik's hopeful face, on Imani's unwavering presence. She looked last at Dunn, Grayson, and Mercer. Power confronted by truth. Judge Harrison's gavel cracked like thunder in the heavy air. These proceedings are hereby suspended. Mr. Rhodes, you are released immediately. Bailiff, please take the named conspirators into custody pending federal charges. This court will cooperate fully with federal authorities in pursuing every thread of this corruption to its source. The gallery erupted in barely contained reaction, gasps, tears, prayers of thanks. But through it all, Imani remained still, her hand resting on Malik's shoulder as justice finally arrived in the full light of day. Judge Harrison lowered her reading glasses, the shuffling of papers the only sound in the tension-filled courtroom. Malik's shoulders were rigid, his breath held as if the slightest movement might shatter this moment. Behind him, Imani stood like a sentinel, her purple heart catching the light, her eyes fixed on the bench where justice waited to speak. The silence stretched until Judge Harrison cleared her throat. Having reviewed the extensive evidence presented, including verified surveillance footage, financial records, and witness testimonies, this court finds overwhelming proof of systematic misconduct and corruption. Her voice carried to every corner of the packed gallery. The charges against Malik Rhodes are dismissed with prejudice. A collective exhale swept through the room. Malik's knees nearly buckled as the weight of false accusations lifted from his shoulders. Imani's hand found his arm, steadying him with the same strength that had carried them both through this fight. Furthermore, Judge Harrison continued, her tone sharpening, given the egregious nature of the exposed corruption, I am ordering immediate action. She nodded to the federal agents positioned near the courtroom doors. Mr. Dunn, you will surrender yourself to federal custody. Harold Dunn's face drained of color. His expensive suit and air of untouchable privilege crumbled as two agents approached his table. This is ridiculous, he sputtered, looking around for support that wouldn't come. Do you know who I am? A defendant in a federal corruption case, Martinez answered coolly, producing handcuffs that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The click of metal closing around Dunn's wrists echoed through the stunned courtroom. Chief Grayson rose halfway from her seat, her carefully maintained facade cracking for the first time. Your Honor, I must protest. Chief Grayson, Judge Harrison cut her off. You are immediately relieved of duty pending criminal investigation. Surrender your credentials and access cards to the federal investigators. Grayson's hand trembled as she reached for her badge, the symbol of authority she'd wielded like a weapon now turned against her. The mask of professional detachment slipped, revealing the fear beneath as reality settled in. Her carefully constructed world of influence and control was collapsing. Officer Mercer. The judge's attention swung to the courthouse officer who had started it all. Approach the bench. Mercer moved forward, his earlier arrogance replaced by visible dread. The maintenance footage played again on the courtroom screen, his actions now viewed through the lens of exposed corruption. Your behavior was not merely unprofessional. It was part of a pattern of abuse enabled by systemic corruption. Judge Harrison's words cut like steel. You are terminated effective immediately. Turn in your badge and weapon before leaving the building. Mercer's face flushed dark red as he fumbled with his badge, the gallery watching as his authority was stripped away in the same public manner he had tried to strip Imani's dignity. The officer who had commanded others to kneel now stood diminished, unable to meet the eyes of those he'd wronged. Through the courtroom's open doors, word spread like wildfire. Courthouse staff, lawyers, and visitors pressed closer, drawn by the historic moment unfolding. The murmur of voices grew as news traveled. Corruption exposed, power toppled, justice delivered in full view. Malik turned to Imani, tears threatening to spill. It's really over? It's over, she confirmed, her voice steady even as her own eyes glistened. Around them, the elderly tenants who'd been displaced by Dunn's schemes embraced each other. Rosa clutched her binder of evidence to her chest, satisfaction written across her face. Admiral Hail stood at attention, a silent witness to vindication. The crowd parted as federal agents led Dunn toward the doors, his handcuffed figure a stark contrast to his usual commanding presence. Grayson followed, escorted by courthouse security, who had once jumped at her every order. Mercer trailed behind, stripped of his uniform, just another civilian now. As the proceedings concluded, people began flowing out into the lobby. The same lobby where Mercer had tried to humiliate Imani, where power had assumed it could act without consequence. But now the space hummed with different energy. Courthouse staff, who had turned away before now, stepped forward to shake Imani's hand. Veterans in the crowd stood straighter, some offering salutes. Community members who'd witnessed her original confrontation nodded in recognition, respect replacing the earlier helpless silence. Imani paused at the lobby's threshold, Malik close beside her. The morning light streamed through the high windows, illuminating the space where she had refused to bend, where one act of resistance had cracked open a system of corruption. The air itself felt transformed, heavy with the weight of accountability replacing the suffocating pressure of unchecked authority. The Purple Heart on her lapel caught the sunlight, no longer a target for doubt, but a beacon of truth that had helped light the way to justice. Around her, the lobby filled with witnesses to change, elderly tenants standing taller, courthouse workers speaking freely, community members gathering close to share in this moment of transformation. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps, warming the stone that had witnessed both injustice and its remedy. People spilled out of the building in waves, their voices carrying a mix of excitement and relief that lifted into the autumn air. Malik emerged into the sunlight, his first steps as a free man faltering slightly before he found his balance. His eyes searched the crowd until they landed on Imani. Without hesitation, he crossed the space between them and wrapped his arms around his aunt. The embrace carried the weight of months of separation, fear, and finally, victory. Imani held him tight, feeling his shoulders shake with emotion he'd kept controlled for so long. "You never gave up," Malik whispered against her shoulder. "Not for a second." "Neither did you," Imani replied, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to break through her composure. The moment was interrupted by the surge of reporters moving forward, microphones extended like probing fingers, camera flashes creating a strobe effect around them. Questions overlapped in a cascade of demanding voices. "Ms. Rhodes, how do you feel about the dismissal? What's your response to Officer Mercer's termination? Will you pursue civil action against the courthouse?" Imani kept one hand on Malik's shoulder, letting him have this moment in the sun. He stood straighter, addressing the cameras with newfound confidence. "The truth came out today," Malik said, his voice carrying clearly across the steps. "Not just for me, but for everyone who's been pushed aside and silenced." The elderly tenants from Dunn's development gathered behind them, led by Mrs. Chen, who leaned on her cane but held her head high. They were no longer invisible victims, but living testimony to the corruption that had been exposed. Their presence added weight to every word. Imani waited for a natural pause before stepping forward. The reporters quieted, sensing the gravity of her words before she spoke. "When Officer Mercer tried to strip away my Purple Heart, he wasn't just attacking a medal," she said, her voice measured but powerful. "He was attacking the right of every person to stand with dignity in public spaces, to be believed, to be heard." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the assembled crowd. Today proved that refusing to accept injustice isn't just a personal choice. It's a community responsibility. The courthouse doors opened again as more people emerged, including court staff who had witnessed the original confrontation. Some looked ashamed, others relieved, but all watched with renewed respect as Imani continued speaking. Admiral Hail approached through the crowd, his dress uniform immaculate in the slanting sunlight. Without ceremony, he raised his hand in a crisp salute. The gesture carried the same power it had that first day, but now it sparked something larger. A court clerk who had served in the Navy straightened and saluted. A security guard who'd been in the Marines followed suit. Veterans in the crowd, some in business suits and others in work clothes, raised their hands in respect. Even those who had never served found ways to show their recognition. Small nods, hands over hearts, quiet gestures of acknowledgement that rippled through the gathering. Imani acknowledged each gesture with the dignity that had carried her through the darkest moments of their fight. When the salutes lowered, she spoke again, her voice taking on a tone of determination that made everyone lean forward slightly. "This can't end here," she declared. "Every week, people walk into this courthouse facing a system they don't understand, that doesn't want to understand them. They need advocates. They need support." Her hand found Malik's shoulder again. "They need to know they're not alone." The crowd murmured as she outlined her vision. A legal support network for veterans, seniors, and families targeted by institutional abuse. Not charity, but solidarity. Not handouts, but advocacy. The displaced tenants nodded in understanding, their own experiences giving weight to every word. "Ms. Rhodes," a reporter called out, "are you concerned about retaliation for speaking out?" Imani's smile held steel. "The time for fear is over. This is about building something stronger than intimidation." The questions continued, but the tone had shifted. This wasn't spectacle anymore. It was witness. People pressed forward not to gawk, but to offer support, share contact information, volunteer services. Lawyers in the crowd stepped up to pledge pro bono hours. Veterans offered to serve as courthouse monitors. Community organizers began coordinating immediate support for the displaced tenants. As the sun dipped lower, casting the courthouse columns in deep orange light, Imani felt a subtle shift in the air. This was more than victory. It was transformation. The very space that had been used to humiliate and control now hummed with possibility. She looked at Malik, seeing not just her nephew but a symbol of everyone who deserved better. The elderly tenants who had lost their homes, the veterans who had been dismissed, the families who had been torn apart. Today marked their first step toward reclaiming power. The crowd began to thin as evening approached. Imani turned toward the courthouse entrance one last time. She walked through the lobby doors, her footsteps echoing on the marble floor where everything had started. The Purple Heart caught the last rays of sunlight streaming through the high windows, its surface gleaming with quiet defiance. No security officers moved to stop her. No one questioned her right to be there. The medal rested exactly where it belonged, on the chest of a warrior who had refused to bow, whose dignity had remained unbroken, whose truth now stood undeniable in the fading light of a day that had changed everything. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.